The library was my space, and there was just so much.
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the boys to have a time.
Kate, we're so thrilled to have you here. I speak on behalf of us all. We are so thrilled to have you here in Toronto. Thank you for coming, for making the trip. Kate's at the end of a very long tour, so we very much appreciate that. And yeah, it's just a joy.
Yeah.
It's a joy to be here with you.
I'm so excited.
This How About Now, which I'm sure there are many people here who have read this over and over since it published, and I know many of you will be getting your copy tonight. It is such an honest and meditative reflection on womanhood, in particular midlife, women in midlife, in a way that I think really makes women feel seen at a time in life that can feel quite invisible, in many ways. I think that I really just wanted to start by talking about you, the poet.
Yeah.
You just sort of your origin story
Yeah.
of sort of how you became
Sure.
a poet. Because I think when many of us sort of pictures a poet in our minds, we sort of have this sort of very vague, sort of whimsical, maybe academic kind of idea of what a poet is. And your poems are just so different. They are so grounded in experience that we all recognize ourselves in. A friend of mine called them very alive in their ordinariness. And I think for me, they really sort of gave me this almost a physical jolt when I read your poetry sometimes, because it just resonates so strongly. So I just wondered if you could talk a bit about what is your relationship to that label poet?
Yeah. Well, it's been a complicated one. I didn't share my first poem with anyone until I was 35, because I really had this idea of what a poet looked like, which was like a guy in a tweed jacket, just wandering by a river, pontificating with like a pipe, and I'm like, no, but I don't look like that. I don't sound like that. We really do poetry dirty, especially in America in the 80s and 90s, just teaching old dead white guys. And there's so much more poetry than that. I hear from people over and over saying, I never liked poetry until I read yours, or poetry is just not for me. And to me, saying, I don't like poetry is like saying I don't like music. You just haven't heard the right song. There's poetry for everyone. There's an incredible account on Instagram actually called Poetry is Not a Luxury, which is a quote by Audre Lorde. And that account shares poetry from all genres, all genders, all eras, and there's really something for everyone. And if you're not on Instagram, which maybe you shouldn't be actually, you could just come to a beautiful library like this, and there's just so much poetry out there for everyone, if not mine, somebody else's. So yeah, it took me a long time to get there. Although I've always written poetry. I wrote poetry when I was 8 years old. I'm a huge nostalgia hoarder, and recently my parents were like, you have to come get all your stuff out of the attic. And so I got these giant shipping containers of stuff, and I pulled out all these journals that I found all my writing, and I found poems that I wrote when I was 8 years old, and they were all about my dead cats. They just kept getting hit on the road. So they're real bummer poems. And then I found all the poetry I wrote when I was 16, and that's so horny. And and all the poetry I wrote when I was in college, again, horny, but also so bad, like so much bad poetry. But I realized then, I've always been doing this. I've always been pursuing poetry, just not necessarily sharing it. And all sorts of other writing too, screenplays, starts of novels, short stories, essay. I was looking through all of this, and it was such a good reminder to me that I've always, kind of been throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. And I've kind of lost the plot with what you asked me about.
Oh, no,
but
this is great. Your relationship to being a poet.
Yeah.
So what happened when you were 35? And because you said it wasn't until you were 35 that you shared a poem for the first time with someone. So can you talk to us a bit about sort of what that transition was like, to sort of putting yourself out there and
I was working on a novel. I was working on a novel for 4 years. I call that my slightly less expensive MFA program. I actually got into the MFA of my choice the same week my husband got into medical school.
Wow.
We were both going back to school in our 20s. We just gotten married, and 2 weeks later I found out I was pregnant. One of those jobs pays, one of them doesn't, and so he went to school and I did not. I stayed home with the kids, and it was some of the best years of my life, but it's also really hard. And when I had my fourth baby, which was very unexpected. It was very difficult. I was telling her actually backstage, because they were like, 4 kids, and I'm like, it wasn't on purpose. I was very depressed throughout that pregnancy. Postpartum was really difficult. And there came a point where I really had to make a decision. Was this whole family going to sink, or was I going to put on a life vest and help us all? And so I put on that life vest. I went back to work. I took on editing jobs to pay for childcare. I like to say at every single event, no matter where I am, not a single page, not a single word, not a single book would be here without childcare. At that point, my husband was still in school then. We had no money. We were actually living on food stamps. Do you have that here?
A version of.
Yeah. Okay. I took on a bunch of editing work. I edited a 700-page Western romance from a guy in Arizona. It was clear from page 1 he'd never met a woman. It's truly the worst book I've ever read. It took me forever, but I just kept taking the checks, and I paid for childcare that way, and I worked on the novel then.
Wow.
And it was when I was working on that novel that I started cheating on it with poetry. And I was in a coffee shop working. At that point, we lived in a 1,200 square foot house, and there was 6 people, so there was nowhere for me to write. So I would take my laptop and work other places. During COVID, I actually worked in my minivan. That was my office. Anyway, I was at this coffee shop, and I was writing poetry, and I decided to post it online. I'd never done that before, and it was really scary, but there was such a great reception to it, and so I was working on that novel and then kind of switched over to poetry, and the rest is kind of history.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I saw online a headline from a Vogue interview with you that in the headline called you the Instagram poet for people who don't like Instagram poets.
Yeah.
Which I thought was so funny. What's sort of your relationship to sort of social media? I mean, it's so funny even talking about you as an Instagram poet now, because now it's like, there's 1,000 other things that ways that people are expressing themselves on social. But what's your relationship to that like?
Yeah, I've been asked about Instagram in every book tour stop for all the books, and it really makes sense. But the thing is, that answer has really changed.
Yeah.
Because Instagram in 2019 is very different from Instagram in 2025, when we are just served, is it the same here? I don't know if we're all getting the same algorithms. We're just served a content to make us angry, and engaged in ways, and also just like 10-second video clips of golden retrievers looking for those tennis balls in the pool. Like, that's so cute, but poetry kind of has gotten set aside in that way. It's been really helpful, especially at first, back in like 2019, 2020. And that was actually a huge criticism. That Vogue piece was kind of funny, because it was kind of like a passive-aggressive way to say something. But there was a lot of criticism then of people like me being able to have success because of Instagram, but not just all artists. It was suddenly like, well, now anyone can be a stand-up comedian. Now anyone can be a singer-songwriter. Now anyone can be a poet. And I was like, yeah, isn't that great? Now you don't need to have a dad in the industry. So in that way, it's been wonderful. Like I mentioned, poetry is not a luxury. All of a sudden, now there's poetry that's so accessible in front of us. In that way, it's been wonderful. It's also a real double-edged sword. And I think we've really gotten stuck on our couches scrolling instead of being out in the physical world. But I've never been more heartened than on this book tour to see groups of women coming together, wanting to be out together, and not at home. Online. I think we're really thirsty for real life, and to get out of the virtual world and back into the real one. And so, Instagram is great in small doses, but I think now more than ever, I'm ready to move on.
Real connection,
Yeah.
in life, real
Yeah.
connection. Yeah. I mentioned this to you when we were chatting before, but there's something and I'm sure so many people in this room can relate to this, but there's something just speaking of connection, such a gift that this collection offers, and all of them do, but of just wanting to just take a picture of the page and send it to a friend, and then the conversation that comes out of that, or even today, a friend, I was mentioning that a friend had said to me their daughter was homesick, and I thought, there's a poem for that, because there's a poem for that here, you know, and it's so that is the connection that this offers, you know. In sharing so much of these poems with friends and people sharing them with me too, I think the one that has really, I feel like really moved many of us the most is a poem called Second Coming. Okay. And I wondered if you could read that for us.
Sure. I want to say I wrote this poem after someone in the audience, who I'm going to make stand up. She came to my house. I know we were going to talk about this later, but actually it kind of relates to this poem now. Mm-hmm. Kind of in conjunction with this photo on the front. This is me. Ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to be naked on one of my book covers. Just kidding. 2 summers ago, a photographer reached out to me who lives in your wonderful country and asked if she could come take photos of me. And in the spirit of how about now, I was like, sure, I don't know you, but sure. She actually stayed in my house with me. Claire, are you here? Oh yeah, stand up. Yeah, she took this. Yeah. Yeah. I really think this poem matches the cover, and so thank you, Claire. We took a bunch of crazy photos, but one of them we went to my very conservative brother and sister-in-law's farm pond, and just hoped to God no farmers would see me take off my clothes. And she took these photos of me. Anyway, this poem is kind of in conjunction with that cover. This is called Second Coming. I stand at the mouth of my second coming. All the time I'd spent worried over what was ending, too blind by grief and fear to see this new horizon, bright and blue and beautiful. I take off my clothes, dive into the clear water. I know I was meant for living. I know it's not too late.
Thank you for reading that.
Well, I know. It's so awkward to read poetry. I don't know if any of you grew up in the church. You have church here. Yeah.
We have church here. We do.
And there'd be like a 7-year-old who would come up and play this beautiful piece for the offertory. And then he would just sit down, and no one would clap, and you'd feel guilty about that for like 30 years. I don't want you to feel bad about that. You don't have to clap. You can, but it's okay either way. Yeah.
Thank you for reading that. What is the thing that has surprised you the most about midlife?
I think that there's just so much to carry. There's so much good and bad, and it really has been a theme of this book. I actually delayed this book by a year due to some health things that really threw me for a loop. I went through a midlife crisis at the very green age of 38. All of a sudden, I was facing my own mortality in a way that I never had before. And at the same time, I felt myself also becoming the version of myself that I'd always wanted to become. Someone told me the other day that turning 40 is like letting your 5-year-old self and your 10-year-old self and your 12-year-old self and your 19-year-old self and 25-year-old self and 35-year-old self, they all get to come out and play together. And I loved that because I do feel that way. Turning 40 has been one of the greatest gifts of my life. We often kind of use 40 as like this over-the-hill metaphor and like, well, it's all downhill from here when all I see is an upward swing. At the same time, it's also been difficult. And so, holding those two things, which I do think has really came through in the book, has been a major theme in my life, and I think in my friends' lives as well.
Yeah, I think there's really something which I really get from these poems is, and to me, I'm 43, and so and there's this. To me, there's this sense of Like, I feel like all through the 20s and through the 30s, there's so much like thinking and analyzing and plotting and planning and doing. And to me, there's really been something about the 40s that it's like you just kind of want to feel. Like you just kind of want to let yourself actually feel things for a minute.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, and you kind of realize that like joy is the matriarch of emotions, and joy holds us so tenderly. But the thing about joy is she's not going to sit at the table unless all of her children get to come. All of those other emotions, grief and fear and anxiety and all those things, if they're allowed to also be here with us, if we're allowed to see those and talk about those too. But it takes so long, at least for me. It took until I was 40 to be able to understand that, and to let ourselves feel. And that's absolutely true.
Do you think that our generation of women are experiencing midlife a little differently than generations before us? What's your impression of that, or how do you feel about that?
I think it's a mixed bag, but I do, I'm really inspired by the women around me who have turned 40. And by the way, I met a woman at an event a few weeks ago who had just turned 85, and she came up to me, her name was Miriam, she came up to me at the event, in the book signing line, and she said, honey, she's like, I know you love being 40, but every year after this, you lose another fuck. And by the time you get to my age, she's like, I'm having the best time. And so I keep thinking about her. She was just such a joy. Anyway, all the women in my life who, all of us have now turned 40, and we're in our 40s, mid-40s, and I've just been so inspired by how they are now, especially those that I've seen in their 20s and 30s, how they've really grown into themselves and are really taking that charge of how about now, and pursuing what they've always wanted to pursue, being who they've always wanted to be. I do see hope and a lot of light here in this generation, and
Interesting. Because it makes me really think about the first poem in the collection, Self-Addressed. Do you want to read that? Because it relates so much to what you just mentioned.
Yeah, this is called Self-Addressed. The problem is the new life costs you the old one. How long it's taken you to understand the difference between letting go and cutting through the rind. How do I look away now that I have seen you? It's the 4th day of October. Take my hand. This is the world.
I love that. Yeah, just this real sense of this next version of yourself, this next version of yourself in life, and really honoring who that is, and letting her feel and do all the things that we talked about. You mentioned sort of some health stuff, and I know you write quite a bit about health anxiety, death anxiety, and the body, and I think maybe that's sort of the contradiction that a lot of women feel in midlife, is this real sort of more emotional freedom and really being who they really are in the world, which is such a beautiful thing. And then there is this physical component to it all.
Yeah, like watching your body decay.
Watching your body change
such
at the same time, right? And it is such a bummer.
Yeah.
And it does sort of feel like all of these changes and all of this anxiety and all of these problems that you don't have names for yet, and trying to figure all the physical stuff out while everything else is sort of, really growing in a way that you might not expect at that time in life. And death anxiety is so real. It is such a real thing. Yeah. Can you talk just a bit about what do you get from writing through that? Like, does writing through that in these poems help you? Is it a way to work through it? Is it more of just wanting that to be witnessed on the page, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I did have to postpone this book for a year, and so there was a period of time where I couldn't write because I couldn't see through it. One of my favorite things about poetry is it's listed in the fiction section, but so you can really hide behind it. But of course, it's all, for me, absolutely true. Every single page of my books. And so, for sure, I worked through it on the page, especially after the fact, and was like, what just happened to me? And how did I get here? And how can I tell the truth about this situation and not just gloss over it? And so, that's where a lot of these poems came from. We were talking about the Wild EM Cream one. I was ordering some crazy stuff on the internet, man, to try to figure some things out. And Yeah. So I think for me, that's always been the case with writing, even in writing novels or true fiction. The truth is always in there, because if you don't tell the truth, it's really boring. I get asked a lot about, how do you write? Anne Lamott gives this great advice. She says, write as if your parents are dead.
Yes.
My in-laws live 15 minutes away, man, and my parents are still alive, which I'm so glad they are. But you kind of have to get into that mindset of not thinking about them, or not thinking about the kind of the criticism, and just really getting to the heart of it. And so I think with this topic in particular, I really tried to do that. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Whenever I get asked for writing advice, I always quote that. I always say, "Write like your parents are dead."
Yeah.
It feels insensitive, but the meaning there is so powerful if you can really get there. But I didn't know to attribute that to Anne Lamott. That's that's so good.
She's such a grouch, but she's so wonderful,
I
and
love
her so much. I want to be just like her when I grow up. Yeah.
Can you read the Wild Yam Cream poem for us?
Yeah.
Yes, that you just mentioned.
Yeah, this is called Wild Yam Cream, Perimenopause, Does It Work? Reddit. What the mind imagines, the soul must learn to forgive. How could I have known time would chase me here? Death felt more certain than finding myself midlife and full of symptoms, strapped to a sinking ship. Is it the ego or the unfinished business of my 20s that finds me begging? Yes, I have dreamt myself into a woman enough times to know it is a gift wrapped as a ticking bomb. Still, I must pick up my axe, sharpen what is left of this now mortal body, and claw my way back home.
Thank you. I did want to ask you about that sort of that personal part of writing poetry, and it is so funny to me that it is shelved as fiction, and we sort of, but yet I think we all make that assumption that the poet is the narrator, and so you are always the narrator of your poems. That's how you like to write, right? Is that, so is there anything that you, I guess a couple questions on that, is there anything that you give so generously to us in your poetry? Is there anything you just wouldn't write about, or that you feel like you stay away from?
I think I'm a pretty open book. There's not really anything I won't write about. It's more protecting the people around me. I have a teenage boy, and he certainly doesn't want me writing books about his changing body. I have a middle school daughter as well. So those things I really do try to protect my kids. I feel like my husband is totally fair game. I have a stage 3 prolapse. My rectum's in the wrong place. I can write about whatever I want. He did that to me, man. I bore his children, so I will write about anything
feels very
for
fair.
him. Yeah. And he knows that. He's a very chill guy. So I think, for me and for him, sure, I will write about anything, but for the kids or people in my life, I try to tell stories from my perspective and leave others' stories as much as I want to sometimes. Sometimes I'll slip in a little revenge poem here and there and disguise it, or else I'll just I have a folder in my Google Drive called Poetry Grave. So sometimes I write pieces and then just stick them in there. But for them, I'll write about anything for me, and I'm happy to chat about anything, and I'm really an open book. I've always been like that. But for the people around me, I do try to protect them as much as I can.
Do you feel a certain pressure? Do you feel like now that you're sort of known as this real truth teller of the female experience, does that come with a certain amount of pressure? Do you ever have months that you just feel like you just don't want to be writing about what life is like, or because I imagine that there's this sort of obligation that maybe exists in you as you go about the world.
I think sometimes, sometimes I feel that way. I really try to tune that out. I really try to do as much as I can to not write for a specific audience or an expectation. I think that is a real creativity killer. The people I find the most inspiration from are the writers who are always taking risks and always trying to change things up, or kind of pushing past what people expect of them. There are a lot of strange poems in this book that my editor, lovely editor, wanted to cut, like Frog Queen, which is a poem I wrote about turning into a frog. And she's like, I don't think this is relatable. And I'm like, I don't think it matters. So I do think, it's best for me to really tune out those voices and to just really try to explore, whatever is popping up in my life or what I want to talk about. Yeah.
And along those lines, it's funny, as I was thinking about talking to you today, I was thinking about how I love having conversations with other writers about their creative process.
Yeah,
and
same.
most of the time that's novelists, right?
Yeah,
But I don't think I've
yeah.
ever talked to a poet really about
Yeah.
their more detailed creative process. And I
Yeah.
wondered if you could talk to us just a bit about what that looks like for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, most of my poetry, the meat of the poems, the heart of it, really comes from my everyday life. That's what I love about poetry. It's what I love about stand-up comedy. That's what I love about song, is you're trying to tell a big story in a short amount of time. And so all the meat of what I'm talking about, that comes from my everyday life. There's a line in one of my poems, I think it's in Marriage Poem, that says, "I love my life except for the noise of it." I found that line. Does anyone here have a bad dog? Yeah, I see a few hands. Okay, I have a bad dog. And she really needs, in order to not be so terrible, she needs to be taken for a long field walk every day. We live in the country, so I was taking her for one of her walks. She gets to run free, for like a half hour. And I was coming back from that field walk in the dark, and I was walking by our big bay window in the front of our house, and I looked in the window, and I saw my daughter sitting at the piano playing a piece, and I saw my husband on the floor playing Magna-Tiles with my youngest, and I saw the other two playing a card game at the coffee table. And I was looking at them, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're so beautiful. I don't want to go inside. And so I pulled out my phone, and I wrote those lines then, and I quickly emailed myself. And I'm constantly doing that at the grocery store, at the post office, when I'm hanging out with my friends. I kind of get these phrases or these ideas, and I email myself or I text myself, or my notes app is such a cluster, but I put it in there, or I write things on a piece of paper and shove it under my office door. And then during those dedicated office hours, where the real writing is, where the hard stuff is, where the rearranging of commas and trying to find structure and tell the story I want to tell, that happens there in those dedicated office hours. So, I really write by ear. I repeat lines to myself out loud. I sound crazy in my office. My husband will hear me in there talking to myself.
So sorry, by ear, you mean
I have to say it out loud and hear it the right way.
Before you put anything down?
I will put stuff down, but then I have to read it out loud to hear how it sounds. It's really painful process because I have to cut a lot of great words because they don't sound right. So I do a lot of that. So yeah, that's kind of my process that way. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And do you, when it comes time to like putting together the collection, so are you sort of always working towards something thematic, or do you feel, or does that just sort of happen naturally because you're pulling from a certain stage in your life? Like how do you think about that?
By the way, I moderate talks all the time, and I'm always looking at the novelist like, tell me everything. So I just want to say, I also want to do this back to you. I keep thinking that. I'm like, but tell me how to write the novel. Sorry, what's the question? Oh, the theme. For all the books, I've really, except for I Hope This Finds You Well, which was an erasure book. For the other ones, it was really, I write probably 50% more that ends up in the book, so I cut about half once we kind of see what the theme is. So yeah, for How About Now, it was very obvious to all of us that it was very much about midlife, and so we kind of kept the ones that fit into there.
I love the thought that we will have all kinds of poetry collections coming from you that will be exactly at the time of life that we are when we need them. I love that thought. So thank you for doing that.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome.
Feels like such a joy to look forward to that. Does anything, like in terms of being a creative person and your creativity, does anything really scare you creatively? Like, is there anything that you think, like you mentioned working on a novel before, which is so interesting. Like, would you go back to that? Do you, like, what you've talked so beautifully about just this real place of like comfort that you're in with poetry. Is there anything that you want to do that kind of scares you that you look forward to?
I'm writing all genres all the time. I started, how I got my agent and signed to my first book deal was actually not through poetry. It was through nonfiction. I was writing for Huffington Post, some personal essays. So I'm always, kind of, like I said, throwing spaghetti at the wall. I think it's really important as a writer to fail as much as possible. And so, yes, that's scary. It's so scary. What's much more scary to me, though, is not trying. I've written so many screenplays. Like I said,
really?
a novel. I was working on a novel last year, short stories, nonfiction. I really love that process, and I think it's so important to me to be always taking risks, always feeling that scared feeling. To me is so important, and I think it's a really important muscle to keep using, is to have that scared feeling, but then to do it anyway. Because like I said, not doing it, that's much worse for me, to get to the end of my life and not try it all. And so, I think I'll always be trying and always be exploring other genres for sure.
I love that. I just want to read it all. I want to read everything you just mentioned. I would love to know. I'd love to know what that all is. I wanted to ask you about success. And I really love speaking to women writers or creative people, but writers about success, because I think that for someone like you, you've had such enormous success, and in a really short period of time, even though you've been working at this forever, as we've heard. And all your books hit the New York Times bestseller list and sell millions of copies, and you're on these great big tours, and you talked to us about sort of the where that all began, which is a very different place. And so has the measure of success changed for you right now? Like with this is your fourth book published. Like how does that feel for you now, or what's your relationship to success like?
I think, like I said, I just want to always feel good about what I'm writing. There has been some pressure on me to kind of write happy commercial poetry. There's a lot of downer poems in this book and in all my work, but I really try to stay true to my voice and what I'm trying to say, and also be playful and silly. There's also some pieces in here that are not traditional poetry. There's a piece, a gynecology intake form. There's a piece about an active school shooter drill, which I know you guys don't struggle with this as much, but in America, that's a huge problem for us. And so I've tried to find stories in kind of strange places, or places that we don't normally see a story, like on a form like that. And so, I think success for me is just constantly trying to look at things a new way. Of course, I want you to read my book, and I want to show up in rooms like this full of such wonderful women, and I want you to stick with me. I want that so much, but I also can't let that dictate what comes next necessarily, because I do think that boxes you in. And so of course, I'm not going to pretend like I don't want my book to sell, but I also think that is a constant struggle, but a good one, to also just keep doing what I want to do and what feels right for me.
That's great. We are going to go to the audience for questions in a few minutes. But first, I thought we'd just do a quick lightning round. Are you up for that?
Yeah.
Can we do that? Okay. So you can answer as long as you want, or just short.
Sure.
And then we'll start thinking of your questions, and then there's going to be a mic coming around.
Sure.
Okay. What is your favorite music to listen to?
Oh my gosh, I love Cardi B. Do you have that here? I love indie folk. I love Brandi Carlile.
I love Brandi Carlile too.
Yes.
Yeah,
I listen to a lot of jazz. I can't stand listening to my family eat. I'm not a mouth sounds person, so I can't. There's a lot of activities I can't do in the quiet. Sex, dinner, road trips. So I have playlists for all these things, and so I really listen to all genres, because there's different genres for different activities.
What's on your sex playlist?
Yeah, Cardi B. She's great, you guys. Yeah. I really listen to everything, almost everything, and I listen to a lot of sad indie folk pop, which is very. I feel like that's what you expect a poet to listen to. Yes, I listen to that, but I also listen to some really dirty rap. Yeah,
love it. What is your favorite app on your phone?
Oh my gosh, Marco Polo. Again, do you have that here?
Ooh, do we? Do we have Marco Polo? I don't know this.
Oh, they should be paying me for this. I have talked about this app on a lot of tour stops. It is my most used app. It's my most opened app. I'm on a family plan.
What is it?
It's basically like leaving I don't know if any of you leave voice notes for your friends. Stop. Okay, it is so annoying. Do not send me a voice note, but that is how I want to communicate. So I use Marco Polo instead. It's like leaving voice notes back and forth with your friends, but in a much more orderly fashion. Voxer, also, that one's just voice, and then Marco Polo, you see the person's face, and I prop myself up in the kitchen, and I'll make a whole salad for my family, and talk about all the reasons why my husband, who's an Enneagram 5, is annoying while I'm making that salad to my friends.
I love that.
It's been really important.
Okay,
for me.
awesome.
Yeah.
What is the worst thing about motherhood?
That's really changed. Because, at first it was sleep training, and then it was tantrums, and now it's my teenager asking me for Snapchat. So it really has changed depending on the day and depending on which age child.
And what do you think the best thing is about motherhood for you?
I think the best part of motherhood for me, just in this brief second that I'm thinking about it, is when that feeling of when you're all piled in bed together, and that feeling of being home, wherever you are together, even if you're not in bed. I think that's the best part about family, is you can feel at home wherever you are when you're with them. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to wear?
This.
This? Is that it? Is that your favorite thing?
Absolutely.
Oh, great. I love that. Who is the poet that you turn to the most?
Maggie Smith edited this collection. She's a huge inspiration to me and a mentor of mine, and I love Maggie Smith. There's so many female poets, though, that I stand on the shoulders of. Wanda Coleman, Sharon Olds, Audre Lorde, Olivia Gatwood. There's Margaret Atwood as well. I know she's a scary witch to you guys, but man, she's a badass. She's incredible. Yeah, there's just so many female poets that I return to over and over again that I could not possibly list here now, but those are a few of them.
Who is your best friend?
I'm glad that my friends aren't here today to hear me answer this question.
We won't say who you pick. We won't tell them.
My friend Mo is very important to me, and I wrote a poem in here called The Bridesmaid Speech for her, because I had this feeling before I wrote that poem that we really have this little sliver of time, if our friend gets married, where you get to publicly pledge your love to them, and how disappointing that is. We focus so much on romantic love, especially in the 80s and 90s, when platonic love is just as important. I couldn't be married without my friends. I couldn't write without my friends. I couldn't mother without my friends. I couldn't breathe without them. And so, yeah, they're one of the single most important parts of my life, and Mo is definitely one of those people to me in my life. Yeah.
My last question for you is going to be: could you just read us your favorite poem in this collection? But do you want to read the Bridesmaid Speech?
Sure. Yeah. I'll tell a little story first about this. Last year, I chaperoned the 8th grade field trip with my son. Thank you. And at lunchtime, we all came into this conference room for lunch to eat, and all the girls, every single one of them, not one was left out. They all sat in circles on the floor, got out their lunch, and yapped. And I looked at them and I thought, oh, this is the best part of the field trip.
Aww.
And then I looked at the boys. And they came in and sat around a table in the middle of the room, got out their lunches, pulled out their phones, and didn't say a single word to each other. And I thought, man, they're missing the best part of the field trip. And I still think about that now. I've been talking to all American audiences, so this doesn't apply as much to you, but I think a lot of the men in our government, if they could just start doing the best part of the field trip, 3 women in a 10-minute conversation could solve so many of our problems.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. Because we know what the best part of the field trip is.
Yeah.
And this poem was for all the women in my life who I never got to pledge my love to at a wedding. And some of those women, Mo included, I read this for the first time. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I read this for the first time in New York out loud to an audience, and they were in the audience, and they were sitting up like this, right in the middle, looking at me. And I'm just so glad they're not here tonight. This is called The Bridesmaid Speech. I have known her all her life. And by that I mean I've seen her in the impossible light of girlhood, the spaces in between, the car on the way to the birthday dinner, the moment before the photograph. I have stood outside the bathroom stall, held tight while her shoulders shook with sorrow. I've watched joy arrive, midnight and unexpected, repeated stories until they were my own. It's true there is a cost to this devotion, but I'll let you in on a little secret. There is very little women choose to keep from one another. How lucky are we to know a love like this?
That's great. Thank you, Kate.